When it comes to being a great NBA player, it's more than just athleticism, size, or even the ability to shoot. The greatest players the NBA has ever seen are also the ones with the highest IQs. Lacking an athletic physique, ability to jump, or even run fast, Larry Bird relied on his keen basketball IQ to be as dominant as a player he was. Statistically, Bird and LeBron James share many similarities with regards to their passing and rebounding ability, with a slight edge for LeBron in assists and Bird in rebounding. However true this may be, you will rarely ever hear a similarity argument be made for the two. It was how Bird and LeBron scored those 20-plus averages and passed those 7-plus assists that made each one of them unique. Lacking the brute mass to move into the bucket and have his way, Bird relied on a deadly three-pointer along with an unguardable one-leg fadeaway for his scoring. Where you begin to see the similarities is in assists, where both players relished the opportunity to pass to the open man as much as they did shoot. And while LeBron certainly holds an edge statistically over Bird's assists, it was those premier highlight passes Bird had become all too known for that placed him amongst the league's greatest in basketball IQ. From behind over his head to Hail Mary's passes across the court, Bird chucked the ball no different than a football quarterback, with similar precision too. Similar to many of the league's greatest passers, Bird had an ability to seemingly keep track of his teammates' involvement on offense to better tweak the offensive play at hand. This was done so well that it created a common phenomenon where defenders are faced with a dilemma. Two defenders can lock down Bird, but this will always invariably leave an open man, which then creates an opportunity for the open layup or dish to the corner. As simple as the play is, it stumped the league's greatest teams throughout the 80s 3 different times with the Celtics. Dr. J talked about Bird's game saying he was a basketball genius. He had been a step ahead, a thought ahead, played the game like a chess game. Former Lakers small forward James Worthy stated something similar about Bird's game, saying, "I'd much rather guard Michael Jordan than Larry Bird because you have to play the game as a thinker when you're playing him. You have to get inside his mind." There will never be a conversation regarding the greatest basketball minds without the mention of Kobe Bryant. Everything from his mentality down to his physicality was squared away. Bryant never brought excuses on the court, and as a result enjoyed a successful career in the NBA. While certainly flawed when you look at the aspects of his selfishness on the court, it was Bryant's superior offensive ability that led the Lakers to 5 championships during his reign. As the league's premier scorer, Bryant knew all the angles and logistics that came with dominating his opponents, no matter their size. There's nothing more telling of this fact than even when the Lakers were without Shaq or Paul Gasol, Bryant was still able to practically single-handedly bring the Lakers to the playoffs. It would also be during this dark age for the Lakers that Bryant had scored his career high of 81 points in a game against the Toronto Raptors. Skeptics can speak all they want about Bryant's selfishness, but the bottom line is, if you're carrying your team to the playoffs year after year, the only thing that needs tweaking are better players around your star. Bryant had a unique ability to essentially base his offensive decisions around the likelihood of a made basket, and if it was determined there was a higher chance to be made with the pass, Bryant did it. Above and beyond being a scorer and labeled a selfish player, Bryant was a winner. His whole Mamba mentality had been predicated on the basis of winning games. With this in mind, it's easier to understand Bryant's decisions offensively. What made Bryant's offensive game easily the most unique in league history was his mastery of every offensive move. Many players knowingly stick to their strengths offensively while hiding their flaws. Bryant seemingly had no offensive weaknesses. Whether it was a contested dunk to a clutch fadeaway 3, Bryant had it all. And it's for this ability that makes Bryant's basketball IQ a cut above the rest. Just as basketball IQ plays a role in a player's ability to scan the floor and pass it, it also plays an important role in deciding your method of attack offensively. Scottie Pippen, who had played against young Bryant while in his prime, spoke of his ability saying, "Looking back at Kobe in 1996, I was at the prime of my career and had an opportunity to watch a young man's career for 20 years. Kobe was a special player. We watched him come out of high school as a very raw, charismatic player, and he developed in my eyes to be one of the greatest players that I've ever watched on the basketball court. His competitive fire was unmatched, and to some degree overcame all of his weaknesses. I've heard a few players even say it. Kobe Bryant had no weakness in his basketball game. He worked hard at everything, and he became great at every part of his game. Now the assistant coach to the Lakers is not far off to assume Jason Kidd's intellect on the court is going to be a great asset for LA. Different from most coaches, Kidd's intellect comes from his professional career in the NBA, where he ran 19 seasons playing from the age of 21 and retiring at 39. While he's never been one to take over games through his scoring ability, it's been Kidd's ability to distribute the ball in more ways one can imagine that places him as a high IQ player. Having led the league in assists during 5 different seasons, it was Kidd's passing ability that allowed the Dallas Mavericks and New Jersey Nets to see the finals despite lacking a loaded roster. Among passing, Kidd had also proved to be an excellent defender, averaging 2 steals a game for the better part of his entire career. Kidd was named to the NBA's All-Defensive team on 4 separate occasions. Despite lacking offensive prowess, Kidd had still been recognized as one of the league's premier point guards, namely because he represented the point guard position in the book, which is why he was a 10-time NBA All-Star. It's no surprise players who tend to understand the game better than most move on to become franchise coaches or executives, and Tim Duncan is no exception. Starting his career out in 1996, much of what Duncan knows about basketball came from the league's most experienced. With David Robinson as his early mentor, along with Greg Popovich as the team's most powerful leadership figure, Duncan was destined for success with the Spurs early on. Duncan functioned more robotically than a regular player, and that's a good thing. As a center who's likely the furthest from flashy or loudmouth, Duncan hits the court with just one goal in mind, and that's winning the game. Shaq talked about Duncan's mentality while playing against him, saying, "The Spurs won because of Tim Duncan, a guy I could never break. I could talk trash to Patrick Ewing, get in David Robinson's face, and get a rise out of Alonzo Mourning. But when I went at Tim Duncan, he looked at me like he was bored and he'd say, 'Hey Shaq, watch this shot right here off the glass.'" Aside from being everything you want in a player, let alone a center, Duncan is even more impressive when you look at his consistency. Before retiring during his 19th season at 39 years old, Duncan averaged double-doubles for 13 seasons. In other words, Duncan remained one of the league's most dominant center power forward players, more than triple the amount of years an average NBA player plays, which is 4 years. And that's not to say after 13 seasons he became a scrub. Duncan's final 6 years in the NBA still saw him averaging 9 rebounds a game with 14 points to match. It's hard to make an argument against Duncan being the most decorated center of the recent time, while Shaq comes close. He falls short in a few categories. With the same team, Duncan won 5 championships and was named the league finals MVP 3 times and the league's MVP twice. Shaq's only one-up on Duncan was that he averaged more points per game. Many believe LeBron James is just a 6'8", 250-pound monster on the court, who through brute force gets his way with little to no strategy. And while it may seem like that for your average viewer, the fact of the matter is, LeBron's game is much more dimensional than most would care to even look into. His name isn't thrown around NBA circles as perhaps the greatest of all time for no reason. Underneath his 250-pound muscular frame is a whole lot of nuance that sadly gets overlooked. His ability to remember his teammates' positions at all times comes from an ability he was born with. Photographic memory, as it's been coined, is an ability some have been born with that gives them the ability to remember details most would forget not long after creating the image. When asked how this ability was developed, LeBron responded, "I've always had it. A lot of my friends when I was younger playing the game, they were like, 'Man, how did you remember that play?' Or 'How did you remember that? It was so long ago. I never thought about it.' I didn't even know what photographic memory meant when I was younger until I got older. It's something that I was born or blessed with. How I take care of my body, how I take care of my game, how I take care of my mind. I want to try and continue to get better. If I lose a step here, but if your mind is sharp and you have a big basketball IQ, you can always cover for these things." This isn't LeBron trying to equate his ability with the basketball to a superhero ability. In fact, many others in the league more qualified than your average NBA viewer have attested to the same. Lakers assistant coach Jason Kidd, who during his playing days was known to have a knack for basketball IQ, talked about LeBron's ability saying, "Gonna help him play until he's 40. His IQ is always gonna help him because he's going to be able to take less steps, right? Instead of running a 6-mile race, he can run a 5-mile race just because of his IQ." Another coach that spoke about LeBron's IQ was Doc Rivers, who recently said, "There's a lot of people in the league with LeBron's body, but there's no one in the league with his brain." Let's face it, LeBron at 35 years old is playing some of the best basketball he's ever played. Prior to the NBA hiatus, LeBron was leading the league in assists per game at nearly 11, doubled with his average rebounds at 8 a game, and along with 26 points per game. This isn't to say LeBron owes his success to his born ability, but rather provides an explanation for some of the things LeBron has been able to do that no other NBA player has been able to do in the past. Fan or not, LeBron's skill is something to be respected.